Right now, Nikola Jokic is leading the Nuggets to an NBA championship. He just might be the best player in the league, but in 2017, no one thought that would be the case. It was actually one of his current teammates that many envisioned holding that title one day. That player is Michael Porter Jr. Today, he's a pivotal part of this Nuggets roster. He averaged 17 and 6 while shooting 41% from 3 this season. But even with that level of production, he doesn't get nearly the recognition he really deserves for how good he's been and how perfectly he fits within this roster. He's become a really solid defender. He's clearly a knockdown shooter, and he's doing all this while standing at closer to 6'11" than 6'10". Most don't realize just how big he really is. He's basically the same height as Jokic, taller than KD, taller than LeBron, roughly the same height as Giannis. But what's so crazy is that he pairs this with a super high release jump shot that basically allows him to get it off whenever, wherever. He's also an elite movement shooter, the perfect skill set to be playing alongside Jokic. We've seen why on countless of occasions, but take Game 4 versus the Timberwolves for example. They are down by 9 points with just 2 minutes left. Then Michael Porter gives them back-to-back contested on-the-move threes assisted by Jokic. In a blink of an eye, they are back in it, and they manage to push it to overtime. As things stand right now, he's growing into one of the league's premier 3-and-D wings. But that's what he's looked at as. Nothing much more, nothing much less. But if we go back in time, back to 2017, things look a lot different. At this point, Jokic is just coming off his second season in the league. He's averaging 17, 10, and 5. He looks extremely promising, but few, if any, are envisioning him to go on to become one of the faces of the league. The same cannot be said for Michael Porter, the #1 high school player in the country, the projected #1 pick in the 2018 draft, a player that had NBA superstar written all over him. Michael Porter is the next Kevin Durant, the next Kevin Durant, the next Kevin Durant. Leading up to his senior year of high school, the massive wing is playing in the Nike EYBL, taking guys off the dribble, splashing threes in the face of every opponent. He's averaging 26 and 12. He would take home co-MVP of the Peach Jam Championship. The other winner, his teammate and future NBA star Trae Young, who would go on to say, he's so talented. He's basically a 7-footer who can dribble. He can score from anywhere. He can post you up. He can take you off the dribble. He can do a lot of things that a lot of people can't. Long day of high school classes, and then you gotta face off with Trae Young and Michael Porter. Now what's so funny about that tweet is the two are clearly dominant together, but it's framed like they were running up against your everyday high school teams. This was the EYBL, the highest level of high school age basketball. Nearly every player is on their way to Division I programs, yet the two were still destroying everyone that came their way. Then in his senior season, it was just pure domination, playing under former Blazer star Brandon Roy for Nathan Hale High School. He would average 36 and 14. He led them to a perfect 29-0 record and took home a state title. In terms of a prospect, he had everything you could dream of. Crazy size with a rare coordination to go along with that. A great athlete, a true 3-level scoring skill set. He was coming out of high school with some of the most hype and expectations we had seen in a minute. Very few prospects ever bring the floor-to-ceiling combination he was bringing. Projecting a Kevin Durant level career was a little ridiculous, but that was really the only player comp that did him as a prospect justice. When it came to the 2018 draft, it was rare to see someone bold enough not to have him as the first overall pick. At the last minute, Marvin Bagley would reclassify and actually went ahead of Michael Porter in the high school rankings. But these rankings are centered around college rather than the NBA. When it came to the draft, he was the frontrunner to be the top selection. But that didn't happen. He didn't even go inside the top 10 of the draft. What happened? He would decide to go to Missouri, a much smaller program that we don't usually see this caliber of prospect attend. It was going to give us the chance to see him run the show and put up some absurd numbers. That was going to happen until this. Just 2 minutes into the very first game of this season, Michael Porter had already made his one and only shot attempt, but suffers a back injury, one of the most concerning injuries in the sport. Following surgery, he would return at the end of the year for just a couple games, but it was clear he wasn't healthy. For most of the entire draft process though, it did appear that his upside was just too much to ignore and he would still be off the board pretty early. Some mocks had him as high as the second overall pick to the Kings, most in the range of the Chicago Bulls at 7. But pick after pick went by, and to the surprise of basically everyone, as the lottery was starting to come to an end, Michael Porter was still on the board. Behind the scenes, more and more concern was growing in regards to his future health. The Clippers held back-to-back selections at 12 and 13. To them, a shot on the guy that was the projected #1 pick less than a year ago was still not worth the risk. But then at 14,
Michael Porter Jr. from the University of Missouri.
Denver just couldn't let him slip by. They couldn't be haunted by the decision to pass on him. I mean, those guys know they got lucky. DeAndre and them know. I played against those guys a ton of times. So I would say he's lucky I was hurt because I feel I would have been the #1 pick. Now, Michael Porter didn't even play in his first season in the league, as he would have to undergo a second surgery on his back. When he finally returned the following season, he looked pretty good, putting up an efficient 9 points a game. The following season though, he would come out and put up absolutely insane scoring numbers of 19 points while shooting 54% from the field and 45% from three. Insane. Being in just his third season, it was already extremely evident the rest of the league messed up big time letting him fall to 14. But then this past year, just when we thought the injuries were in the past, just when we thought we were about to see Michael Porter blossom into a star, he came out and started the season looking terrible. His production was awful, something wasn't right, and well, that was the case. He'd be sidelined for the remainder of the season. He would have to undergo his third back surgery since 2017. Things were getting concerning. Was he about to be added to the long list of incredible young careers ripped apart by injury? A scary situation for the Nuggets. They just gave him a 5-year, $172 million extension. Coming into this season, we really just didn't know what to expect. Not just for Porter Jr., but they also had Jamal Murray returning from an ACL tear. But luckily, they didn't have to wait too long to take a massive sigh of relief. MPJ looked like his 2021 self. He averaged an efficient 17 a game, suddenly was a respectable defender, and ultimately played a massive role in the Nuggets most likely winning this title. But what can we expect going forward? This isn't talked about enough. Without that latest injury, who knows where his game would be today? If these injuries can finally be put behind, the 24-year-old still has a ridiculous amount of untapped potential. We all talk about how good this Nuggets team is and how good they will continue to be, but there isn't enough talk about just how good they can be. Two of their best players are just a year removed from injury, two players still fairly young and yet to reach their ceiling. Michael Porter is putting up some serious numbers while still bringing very little as a shot creator, something that was supposed to define his game and one day still might. It's also fascinating to think about all the league-wide implications had Michael Porter Jr. not gotten hurt, had he continued on the trajectory he was on and became Phoenix's #1 pick over Ayton. Where would the Suns be today? Would Ayton have gone to the Kings at 2, Bagley at 3, Luka to the Grizzlies at 4? It's tough to say, but his success will inevitably affect drafts going forward. It's hard to imagine the same scenario happening for a very long time. No matter the injury risk, at the time, and unquestionably looking back, there's just no way you can justify him nearly making it out of the lottery. What MPJ has pulled off is extremely commendable. He is someone that was the best player on the court nearly his entire life. He was gifted with an incredible physical profile for the sport, but all that came crashing down with scary injuries completely out of his control. There were times he even questioned his future.
I don't have any bitterness towards any team because I was low-key scared myself. Like, I didn't know if I was going to bounce back the way I wanted to.
The mental toll that takes on you is hard to put into words, and this wasn't one isolated injury. He's had to come back from 3 separate surgeries all in the same body part. But throughout it all, even after getting the max extension, he has put in the work to come back, and most of the time better than ever. Few players are capable of that. The mental side of this game is rarely talked about, but serious injuries like that can be just as damaging to the mental as it is to the body, especially for a player like Porter, where the risk is always there, always a threat, most likely always on the mind. Most of the credit has to be given to Porter. He is the one putting in the work. But as we've been talking about a lot lately, the consistency and culture established within this Nuggets franchise played a significant role in the outcome. Everyone loves to make out-of-context tweets about the seeding of Denver's opponents in this playoff run, discrediting them with a quote-unquote easy path. When will people start talking about the journey this team went through to reach this point? No one believed Jokic would be anything when he went in the second round. Jamal Murray missed the first 16 shots of his career. He's coming off a torn ACL. Michael Porter went from the high of being the top recruit in the country to the low of seeing potentially all his time and energy go to waste, yet still managed to come out on top. Bruce Brown went unwanted and overlooked in free agency without justification. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was a salary dump. They earned the #1 seed, but still don't get respect or even much coverage coming into the playoffs. This is a team of underdogs, as corny as that is to say. Anyone that suggests it isn't is flat out lying through their teeth.